the Suicide Monk Podcast, a platform dedicated to fostering open and honest conversations about the deeply sensitive and complex topic of suicide. Before we delve into the narratives and discussions presented here, it's important to emphasize that we are not medical professionals, therapists, or counselors. We do not possess the qualifications to offer clinical advice or treatment. Instead, the Suicide Monk Podcast serves as a safe space for individuals to share their personal stories and experiences, all while preserving their anonymity. We encourage our guests to tell their stories anonymously, recognizing that privacy and anonymity can be crucial for those who wish to share their experiences without fear of judgment or exposure. Our mission is to create a supportive community, raise awareness, and promote understanding, all while emphasizing that seeking professional help is crucial when dealing with mental health issues and suicidal thoughts. If you or someone you know is in crisis, please reach out to a mental health professional or contact the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-8255 for immediate assistance. Together, the Suicide Monk Podcast aims to break the stigma surrounding mental health and let those who are struggling know they are not alone.
Welcome to the Suicide Monk, and I am your host. Today, we're going to be following up on part 2 with Anne, and this is the story of her husband and their relationship and her inside knowledge into his mental health, how she dealt with that, and then what he left behind in some of those shattered pieces. So just join us today, sit back, relax, and enjoy. It's a hard story. It's a heartfelt story. If it doesn't tug on you, well, you're probably on the wrong podcast. So, all right, thanks for listening. Oh, and now I'm learning some new stuff, so I'm going to share that with you. Let me see if I can remember it as I do my reading today. Q&A poll. Oh yeah, I'm going to do Q&A polls. I think I'm going to start doing a 15, no, maybe a 30 minute. This is kind of a new idea. Maybe a 30 minute, join me for coffee on Thursday morning and do a reading and then do questions from the prior week. Now, obviously I can't do that in the first week, but if you guys participate in this, it will drastically and help spread the word. So, please join. I'm going to put some questions out there. I might have to do it for a week or two, but hopefully you guys will interact with that, and that would be fun. I think, I'm having fun in the midst of my dark parts of my life. I think that's it. We'll just do Q&As, and I think I'm going to start trying to do videos at some point here once I figure out how to edit that. Seems like a good idea, but anything to push it forward. So thanks for joining us, and we'll see you on the flip side. Marriage. When did you get married?
I was just a few weeks before I turned 21.
Okay. And how long were you married?
10 years. Almost.
Okay. You want to give us a background on your husband and
Sure.
like where you guys met and how you met? Do you have any fond memories that you'd like to share?
Sure. I still probably somewhere. I think mostly it's all been blocked out. But we'll see if stuff comes up as I start talking. So we met at church in a single adults group, because Mormons are always happy to put people together to marry off and reproduce.
Right.
That's kind of the thing. And so we met there, and I kind of hated him at first, and then took time to get to know him, or gave him 10 minutes of my time, and it's like, oh, okay, this isn't like a stupid, heinous person. I guess I can actually have a conversation with you. So our relationship developed quickly because Mormons don't have sex before they get married. So generally they try to
Marry you off quick.
get married fast. Yeah, because otherwise you're going to hell if you have sex before you get married. And, so just like we met in March, started talking and dating in like May. We're engaged in July with an original wedding date set for October, but those sexual urges are strong, and we did actually have sex before we got married. And so then in like the shame of repentance and punishment, we were like, fuck it, let's just get married in September so that then we can continue having sex. And then it's with permission.
Right.
Like now it's allowed.
Right.
So, instead of feeling shitty for having sex with the person that you love and that you want to marry and that you've already made plans to marry, like instead of being shamed for that and guilted for that, like let's just get married and then we'll continue to repent over like who the fuck makes somebody repent for having sex with somebody you love? Like that God's an asshole.
That God is an asshole.
That God is an asshole.
You give these parts that we're not supposed to use, but only on occasion. It's like only under certain circumstances can you use that, and otherwise you're tormented. Thank you. You're welcome.
Yes. And he's definitely more preoccupied policing unmarried consensual sex than he is
right.
than he's concerned about non-consensual sex at all.
Yeah.
So he needs to get his priorities straight.
Right.
So yeah, we got married and then, quickly started having kids. It wasn't the original plan that we had, but that's what we ended up deciding to do. And so we had 5 kids very quickly. And we had started living in Colorado, and then year and a few months after we got married, we moved to Kansas where his family was living, and we wanted to live close to them. So we moved to a small town in Kansas, population 3,000. And my knowledge of his suicidal thoughts started when I think it was before we were engaged. I'm not sure. I don't know if it was before we were engaged or not. But
well, chances are that if you guys were having a conversation, you probably know about it. He probably divulged it at some point.
There was one point where, like he had told me about it, and he had told me that he had, so he actually had made an attempt already. He told me that his suicidal thoughts started around age 14 and frequent when his family moved to Kansas when he was 14. And that he had run away from home over it, and then, came back, and nobody, like, he never really got help for it. He just tried to be a better person.
He's trying to manage it himself.
Scripture and prayer.
Yeah.
Yeah, just scripture and prayer. So just that. And then he went on his mission for the church when he was 19, and he was in California, serving his mission there. And suicidal thoughts increased during that time as well. To the point where he did make an attempt. And at that point they said, oh, well, if you're trying to kill yourself, we need to send you home. So it was essentially the equivalent of a military honorable discharge. Like, you did your best, but you need to go home early. So he did, and then he enrolled in college. And so, like, his family was still living in Kansas, but he had an older brother who was living in Denver. And so instead of going back to Kansas, he lived with his brother and was going to college in Denver and had access to a counselor. He had been on medication during his mission, and that was when he made the attempt on his life. So he was willing to do counseling, but he was scared of medication because that was where things got bad enough that he actually tried. So he wasn't willing to do medication, and he did counseling for a while, and then just kind of got to a point where he didn't like doing that because it made him feel worse. So then he was opposed to counseling as well. So from the point that he was 21, he just lived with it on his own and didn't get any help.
Wow.
So
I can tell you that's torment.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. And then you start dating somebody who makes you feel good and makes you feel happy, and those thoughts go away. And then at the end of the night, you go home and they come back. So, he got to a point during our dating relationship where he's just said, hey, like, he had a crying breakdown at the end of one night and was like, it's so hard for me to go home. And he explained to me why. And, that kind of shocked and horrified me too. And I was like, well, of course I'm not going to send you home if that's what it's like.
Right.
So, but again, that goes into the whole Mormon thing of,
it's very taboo.
yes, you can't do that.
Right.
So, I mean, even at first we weren't having sex, we were just sleeping together. Because I had to hide him in my bedroom from my roommate. I couldn't even just say, well, just be on the couch.
Right.
Because, you can sleep on the couch and not go home. But that would have not been okay to my roommate. So I just hid things and let him be in my room. And so then we were sleeping together, and then that's, sex happens because that's what you do.
Right.
If you're a normal human.
Yeah, I'm not.
It goes in that direction. If you're sleeping together and you've got those sexual attractions, then it goes in that direction. One does not have that degree of self-control.
Yeah.
Usually.
Right. Biblically, I think sex is, there's a reason for it, that it should be singular. And that's, the obvious. You risk disease, you risk bad situation, you risk rape, there's, especially for a woman, risk pregnancy.
Yeah.
And men kind of get a free pass when it comes to
all of it.
All of it. Really, there's not really much, there's not really a whole lot of consequence for somebody who rapes and ruins somebody's life. There's not much consequence for a pedophile. They ruin people's lives, destroy them,
Yeah.
And there's really no consequence. So, yeah, I think a lot of the biblical stuff that Christianity or Mormonism, all of it across the board is it's just control with all the narrative, and I think it's not a heaven or hell issue. It's just
No.
there's consequences to our actions and decisions. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
But the omnipotent God, I think, knows that.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I mean, that's why it's put in place. It's not, well, I hate you for it.
Right.
That's a really bad God.
Mm-hmm.
A really bad God.
Yeah.
If you want to live with that God, go ahead.
Exactly.
But go ahead.
Yeah. So I knew about these things before we got married, and the way that he explained it to me of, oh, well, these thoughts just go away when I'm with you. I was like, okay, so then it's like, it's not going to be a problem. Like, this isn't going to be an issue during our relationship. But again, that was people not understanding how things work.
Yeah.
So we got married, and I was thinking that, things were going to be fine, and this was not going to be a prevailing theme in my life. But those thoughts continued to come back for him. And it's not that he ever felt depressed, and it's not that he ever wanted to die. It's just that he couldn't stop the thoughts.
So you
That's
don't think
the way he always described it.
Yeah.
He's like, I'm not depressed. Like, and he would act fine, and he'd be engaging in his interests and be happy and laughing and joking. I mean, granted, people who are depressed do that too. It's a mask. But usually one of the signs of depression is withdrawing from your interests. He was always actively engaged in our family and our relationship, in his hobbies. He was developing new hobbies.
so he was thriving.
He's still just under all of that, had incessant thoughts just pop into his mind. You should kill yourself. You should kill yourself. You should kill yourself, to the point where he was such an avid journaler. He journaled all the time. He journaled every day. And if he missed a day, then he would backlog.
Okay.
He kept count. He kept count of the number of thoughts, the number of times that he had the thought during the day to kill himself. And he always notated that number in the margin of each journal entry. So.
Wow, he was actively involved in his.
There's an entire, years and years worth of that data collection of days of 0, 0, 0, 0, and then days of 45 and days of 80, and a whole range.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So he just always tracked it.
What did he do for work?
He didn't finish college. We got married while he was still going to college, and then pregnant quickly. And so he struggled with work, school, and family balance. And so he chose to quit school and just do work and family. And so when we got together, he was doing security at Raytheon in Aurora. And And then we moved to Kansas, and he worked for a company that, like, that fixed sewers and septic tank stuff. And then he worked at a machining company, and so he was on the floor as a machinist, and then um, moved up into quality control.
Okay. Would you consider him a intelligent man?
Yes, highly intelligent.
Well, that's where I'm going with that. It sounds like he is.
Yeah.
Just from the little you've told me, I'm like, okay, yeah. Like, did he see so a lot of, and you'll hear this often if you talk to enough people who think about suicide, and you mentioned it earlier in the beginning of your story, was what's the point? Generally, at least what I'm finding out is that people who are intelligent, and I could say, oh, well, in the spiritual background, but most Americans have a spiritual background of some sort.
Whatever nature, yes.
Yeah. When you enter into the combination of the two, you can't reconcile what you're told life is supposed to be and what it actually is. And what I mean by that is we have these narratives that we're taught by the government, by the church, by our parents, by our peers. But when at some point there's like an awakening that happens, and you're like, I'm only one person. How am I going to reach anybody? How am I going to do anything? What good am I? Like, you start to minimize your ability to positively impact people's lives. So then you're like, well, even if I do it on a small scale, what's the point?
Yeah.
I feel this bad, so what's the point? It's not getting any better for me, so what is the point? And that's kind of the thought process that starts to happen. And when the veil's lifted, the darkness is standing right in front of you, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And you kind of mentioned that earlier in your story. I'm like, that's the low grade depression that I feel every day. Every day. I'm like, what's the point?
Mm-hmm.
But go ahead.
So we lived in Kansas for 6.5 years, and then moved to Colorado Springs. And I'm actually going to backtrack. Nope, I'll get to that. So we moved to Colorado Springs, and he got a job working at another military manufacturing company. And then at one point we discussed and decided that it would be a good idea for him to join the Air Force Reserves. That was something that we had talked about a lot of times throughout our relationship, that he had interest in doing. He wanted to do this. He wouldn't, or go through the ROTC program or whatever. And just any degree of, hey, I have interest in being in the Air Force. And at that point, like, we had 5 kids, but he wasn't excluded because of his age. So it was like, this is the last chance. If you wanted to do this, then okay, we need to do it now. And so that was something that he really wanted to do, and had always been encouraged by his older brother, who was an Air Force reservist. And so we decided to go for it. And that was in July 2018. And so he went off to basic training, boot camp, and I packed up the kids in our Honda Odyssey and went on a road trip. Because I wasn't gonna manage 5 kids' emotions at home of, why isn't dad coming home every night? We miss dad. If we're not home, then this isn't a thing that's happening. So
yeah, I can't complain.
This is going to be how I process this. If I'm going to be a single parent for 6 months, then we're going to go play. And so that's what I did. And things unraveled quickly, though, because when he got to boot camp, he was asked questions about his medical history, and even though he had answered those in the application process, his medical history, his mental health history, in boot camp, he told them that he had made, that when he was 20, at this point he was 30, 31. So he told them that when he was 20, he had made a suicide attempt, and they not only red flagged that as a thing, but also the fact that that was not mentioned on his his initial paperwork on his application. And that was because he was sick when he filled out the application. And then, when he had mental clarity, he told his recruiter, oh, hey, I filled that out wrong and it should say this. And she said, no, don't change anything. So he made a mistake. He tried to fix the mistake and was told not to. So maybe if that mistake had been corrected in the first place, he might have been red flagged in the first place and not been let in to begin with.
Yeah.
And so, okay.
Not felt that disappointment.
Right. But then here he is, accepted in and then red flagged. And then on top of that, accused of giving fraudulent information. That, they indicated that, this could be a dishonorable discharge. This could affect your ability to get a clearance or work for any government agency, which was his job.
Right.
And so, all this stuff gets dumped on. And then on top of that, he's pulled out of the main group and put into this holding zone. It was called, medical holding or whatever, for the people who it had been determined you're going to be discharged for whatever reason. But while we process that paperwork, you're just zoned off. So the Air Force term for that was med hold, but for the guys who were in it, they called it purgatory. This is just where we are waiting for somebody to let us live. And so that also unraveled him, that unhinged him, because there were some guys in there who were clinically insane, saying, I'm going to grab an automatic rifle or whatever. I'm going to grab a gun and I'm just going to go kill as many people as I can. So he's in the same place with those people who are
actually
yes. And so that felt like a very unsafe environment for him, and there was no solid supervision and security. So he unraveled a lot. And when he was discharged, the whole process, the whole experience was maybe 3 or 4 weeks. That was it. Not just med hold, but I mean, from the beginning of being I said goodbye to he was returned to me. No, it wasn't 3 or 4 weeks. It was 5 or 6 weeks, but still, it was less than 2 months.
Wow.
And he was returned to me, and he was not the same person. He had massive anxiety attacks and panic attacks, and he had PTSD. He'd have triggers. Like, we couldn't go out in public because being in a crowded place was just a complete panic meltdown for him. He couldn't participate in taking the kids trick-or-treating. There were a number of times that he'd managed to come home from work, and because he was still able to keep his job, that was fine. But like, he'd get home from work, and that was like as much energy as he had for the day. So I would still do all of the night stuff. I would still be doing all of the meal and cleanup and feeding the kids and getting them to bed. And then I would come downstairs and find him in a fetal position in the corner of a kitchen having a panic attack. And then I'd have to take care of him through that. And so he was returned to me at the end of September. And I'm phrasing it that way. Because that's how it felt like. It was just, okay, well, we broke your husband. Here, you can have him back.
Right. Yep.
Without acknowledgement of breaking him.
They did the same thing to my son.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah.
That's what the military does. So from the end of September until February, there was it was just me taking care of him. And begging him to talk to a counselor, see somebody, get help. And he didn't until February. Meanwhile, I was starting to go through my own mental breakdowns, and my mental health was unwinding, of just the inability to cope with this. And he didn't want anybody to know what was going on. He didn't want to be stigmatized. He didn't want to be viewed differently. And that was how he was with his suicidal thoughts the whole time of our relationship too. He didn't want anybody to know any of this. So that meant that I carried it all alone for him, but I had no support because I couldn't talk to anybody.
Right.
So
yeah, this stuff is heavy.
It's fucking heavy. So that was my experience. And finally, around February of 2019, he finally listened to me and sought out some help. But, again, from his previous experience, he was hesitant to do so. He was hesitant to do any talk therapy.
Yeah.
Because that made him feel shittier before. That's how therapy works, though.
You're starting to take a hard look at yourself.
It makes you feel bad.
Yeah.
And you have to suck it up for a couple months, and then after you get enough out, then the healing starts to take place and you can start to feel better. And so if you get scared after 3 or 4 sessions of, oh, this makes me feel worse, it hasn't been enough time for it to help you feel better. But when you're already in such a low place that you think it can't get worse, and then you try something to help you and it makes you feel worse, that scares the shit out of you. So there's that too. Anyway, so he saw a therapist, and that therapist gave him a soft diagnosis of manic depressive. That's what it was. So not bipolar where you've got it. I don't know. It was different from bipolar, but the manic depressive.
They're extreme. They're extreme highs and extreme lows.
Yeah.
And the more manic you are, the worse it is. Like I have a friend, she has deep, deep lows and really, really high highs. Like I'm kind of that way too,
Mm-hmm.
but I recognize it so I can kind of manage it, control it, not let it take over. Like when I feel really high, I'll just sit, because I'll start saying shit and doing shit. And then I look back and I'm like, well, you did this out of this and you kind of made a fool of yourself. And then now we're back on the road to depression.
Right.
Beat myself up.
Yes.
So manic depression. Okay.
Yeah.
But he claimed early on in the marriage that it wasn't depression.
Right. And he still never felt depressed. And that may be like a misunderstanding of it, or it may be
Possibly. Yeah.
Depression takes on different faces and different forms and manifests in different ways. It's got different symptoms.
Yeah, it does.
And so if your symptoms of depression don't match with what your general definition and understanding of it is, then you may not even recognize
right.
that you are depressed.
Well, the reason I have a friend, his son has these thoughts that pop in his head, but he's like, I'm not depressed.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's really interesting. This kind of, the darkness like this can pop into something that's relatively good.
Yeah.
And then take control a little bit at a time. So
yeah, I mean, that's how my husband felt. Was that he never felt like he was depressed because he would even say, like, I'm feeling happy and I felt really happy today and I had a good day and I had good experiences with the people around me. And yet these thoughts keep popping in my head. I can't make them stop. I can't turn that off.
Huh.
And so, but the manic depressive label with all of the, like, from the textbook, here are the bullet points of how this looks. He felt very seen. He felt validated. He was like, oh my God, for the first time, there's like possibly an answer for what I'm experiencing. And there's hope. He felt hope. For me, it felt like a death sentence.
Why do you say that?
A death sentence for my life.
I
felt despair.
For his medical diagnosis?
Yeah. Because I was like, this is a real thing. It's not going away. It's not going anywhere. This is forever.
So this is so I guess if maybe I'm reading this right, this kind of brought maybe you back to your brother on that. Because
no, because I wasn't thinking anything about suicide.
Okay.
Or my husband's suicide. I still didn't think anything was going to happen.
That was just the detriment of
it was the detriment and it was despair from my life. Like, this is always going to be part of my life. I'm always going to have this with him.
So it's like jumping on the roller coaster with him.
Yeah. And
not
just
wanting to.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I was already at like my lowest point. Not of like suicide or anything, but just absolute despair of, I cannot handle his mental health anymore. I've already been handling his mental health for 10 years. And now when I'm already exhausted and having my own breakdowns, now you tell me there's a name for this.
Yeah.
It's a real thing. It's not going away. This is never going to go away. So that just caused me to spiral further.
Yeah, well, that's understandable. I mean, and that's what I realize about myself is I don't want anybody to take care of me. But so often in my life, somebody's had to. And I'm frankly tired of being taken care of.
Yeah.
So about 5 years ago, I stopped being a victim. And I think that's the switch that has to happen. There's a lot of things that have to happen, but that's one of them. You got to stop being a victim and get your ass off the couch or out of bed and start doing it for yourself, because nobody should have to do that for you. They can walk beside you, but they shouldn't have to carry you.
Right. Exactly. Supporting somebody and being there with them is different than carrying all of that weight.
Yeah.
Single-handedly.
Well, you're doing all the work too.
Right.
That's why you're carrying the weight.
I was doing all the work and it was breaking me. So yeah, that diagnosis broke me further. And then he was going through medication for it and still going to his therapist and getting medication changes every 3 weeks. Like, okay, did this improve? Did this not? Like, so they were adjusting it and dialing it in. So
that's a dangerous process.
It was. And that's when things really just collapsed. In my desperation of holding everything in, bottling everything in, I exploded in the direction of having only one person that I felt like I could talk to and that understood me, and that developed into an affair. And that started after he was returned home to me, and then he found out, and then we were trying to work through it, and I stopped, and we were starting to go to marriage counseling, and but in the being cut off from my emotional support again, I just
spiraled again.
I did. And so things were bad. And then that's where I was telling him, I can't handle this anymore. You need to get help. And so he was so that's when he started going to therapy, and that diagnosis, I couldn't hold things in anymore again. And so I resumed talking with the other person, and then that ended up resuming the sexual relationship, and necessary for me. Like, it was something that I clung to for survival, of like, this is just my outlet. Like, I have to talk to somebody and be with somebody. And
so you're actually being taken care of instead of having to take care of.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I remember one conversation, when my husband was asking me, well, but why did you have to talk to somebody else? Why couldn't you talk to me?
Right.
Well, I need somebody on the outside to talk to. I can't talk to you and tell you what a burden you are to me.
Right.
Not even necessarily that it's like a burden of complaint, but like, it's so heavy, and you've got your mental health problems and you already feel shitty. How am I going to tell you that makes me feel shitty? How am I going to tell you that taking care of you and helping you is an overwhelming thing for me to bear?
Yes.
I can't unload that to you and vent that to you. It needs to be to somebody else.
Yep.
How, you
Well,
know, you
I mean, I would
have to
imagine.
have what, like, it's just a psychological thing. When you are in a stressful situation, it doesn't help to talk to the person who's also in that stressful situation with you. You need somebody else with a different perspective who can empathize, because the person who's having stress with you isn't capable of empathizing.
Right.
I mean, you guys already understand each other, but you're both in that,
Well, at that point, you already
you know?
you have certain walls that are built that don't allow you to move in the direction of nurturing a relationship, because those walls are built for a reason. You're not talking for a reason. You got to figure out why you're not talking.
Yeah.
And then if you can actually approach it, they have to be doing hard work on themselves to be able to accept what you have to say. And the same goes for you. You have to be doing it. It becomes reciprocal at that point, even in the toughest situations. But if you don't have that foundation, you'll never grow. You have to have the outside. You have to have counsel of some sort.
Right. And even just having a different perspective that can offer a different viewpoint. Yes. And hey, maybe there's a different solution that you can't see because you're in that situation. Maybe there's a different thing that you can try. Other people have different ideas, right? Because they're not stuck in that situation with you. And so if you're stuck in that situation and, talking to the other person and trying to get help from the other person is not helpful, because you're both stuck in that same situation. You need outside perspective.
Yeah.
So yes.
Can I ask you a question about that? Why did you choose a male?
Because he gave me the time of day.
That's fair.
He was there.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's just it.
So
I latched onto somebody who showed that he cared, gave me time, and understood.
Well, and again, you didn't have to take care of him.
Could have been a woman.
Yeah.
If I had a woman friend who did that.
Well, there is that.
I mean, I'm just saying it. That's not to say that I didn't have. I don't know. I was.
Yeah, and this is not a slight against women, okay? But what I've found in general is that there is this lack of depth for a lot of women. They're afraid of each other. Maybe I don't know what it is, but they don't. There's a reciprocation that doesn't happen at a certain level. Like, how am I going to tell you that? If you do have a woman friend, they generally just agree with you. Men are obstinate enough, and we just got enough asshole in us to be like, well, no, that's not right, or that doesn't sound right. We'll call each other out very quickly, but it's not in a catty way. It's like, well, that's illogical, dumbass. Let's look at it a different way. And It's kind of like having boys to girls when they're growing up. Girls are great. They just require more nurturing. Boys are great because you can take them outside, beat shit out of them, and everything's good. You can't do that to girls. You have to nurture them into, but girls are also the ones that show you the most love, show you how to love. So they're the quality of both humans are really great. But it does seem that I have a lot of girlfriends. They'll tell me things they can't tell their girlfriends. But I also invite. I want to know what you're struggling with so we can get to the light. I want to know where life begins. So let's get the shit out of the way. I haven't been able to do that for myself. But I haven't had a voice either. And the more I do this, the light seems to be lightening my load.
Yeah.
Which is kind of what you're saying with your husband. He didn't allow himself to have the means to talk to somebody.
Right.
And then, but if you're doing that, It's going to take years. It may take it all his life, but at least he's doing it. At least he's venturing down that road. And that's, most people don't want to look at their baggage. They don't want to unpack their suitcase and look at all the moldy clothes. It's like, just clean that fucking thing out and learn how to live, learn how to travel in a new suitcase. It's kind of a reinvention of yourself. So go ahead.
With resuming the affair, my husband found out again. And so he said, okay, we're done. We're going to get a divorce. His first reaction was to take the kids away and tell me that I was never going to see my kids again. And that lasted maybe 48 hours. And then we were living together and discussing, okay, how are we going to break this down? Because, and I had no objection to the divorce either, because I was burned out.
Right. Yeah.
I couldn't keep doing it. So there was no objection. There was no argument or fighting on that. But we, decided to get divorced. We were trying to just do preliminary discussions together of how's this going to break down, what kind of custody arrangements, who's moving where, stuff like that. And at one point he wanted to fight about things, and I said, I'm so tired. I'm so tired of fighting. I'm so tired of fighting to do the things that I want. I'm tired of fighting to keep you here. I'm tired of fighting against your demons for you to take care of you. I'm tired, just everything. I didn't express this. I just said, I am tired of fighting. I don't have any fight left in me. So,
yeah,
I don't want to fight.
And I know that feeling.
And I walked downstairs to sleep on the couch, and it completely enraged him that I wouldn't fight.
Yeah, I just went through that with somebody too.
And but I just had given up months previously, and was like, I have no fight in me. I'm just gonna stop fighting things. Things are gonna happen the way that they happen. Whatever happens, just happens. I'm not gonna fight against things, and I'm not gonna fight for what I want. It's just gonna be whatever. So I went downstairs to the couch, and he was raging and slamming things upstairs. And, I remember texting my partner and telling him that it kind of scared the shit out of me. And then angry husband comes down the stairs with a suitcase and a car key and tells me to get out of the house.
Did he pack it for you?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. He packed a suitcase for me and gave me his car key because I drove the van. So he kicked me out of the house in his car. And again, I wasn't going to fight it because I was scared.
Right.
In addition to having no fight in me at this point, I was scared of what he might do. Not that he had ever shown any violence before, but the erratic mood swings of the medicine and the mental health to begin with, and then the anger over the affair and the dissolution of her marriage, I was not going to resist anything. I just asked him if I could take the kids with me. I was concerned about leaving the kids with him. And he would not let me take the kids. So I left and I went to my partner's house. And then the next day, I don't remember if I had texted my sister that night or if it was the next day, but she had a complete panic that this situation was happening, because she's a funeral director and she's seen too many funerals come from these situations of parent sees no way out, so takes everybody else out with them. So she was in a complete panic, called to have police do a welfare check on the kids, advised me to get a third-party neutral friend to go back to the house with me so that there's witness, balance, mediation, so that I could properly get things and kids. And so I went back and I got the kids out of the house, and stashed them at other friends' houses, not telling him where I was sending them, where I was taking them. Friends that I knew well and trusted, but that he didn't have contact with. So I put the kids in what I felt were safe houses, and then I went to the courthouse to petition for a restraining order. And since he had made no violent threats, no verbal threats of violence or harm, I could not get a restraining order.
Right. Yeah.
The judge was near tears, telling me that she couldn't do that. She said she felt the volatile situation and was very sorry that she couldn't do anything to help me. So the next day, I lost my train of thought.
You were looking up.
Yeah, I was looking up the divorce papers, and it was around 1:20 in the afternoon that I got a text from him saying, "This should simplify things, at least for the long run. Tell the kids I love them. I love you too. Not that you would believe that." And I thought he was just referring to...
It's not easy to decipher that.
Right. I thought he was just referring to the situation where I had taken the kids with me, and I said, "Okay, like, I will return them to you on Friday and you can have them for the weekend." So I thought he was just indicating that this should simplify things. But then that evening, a bit after 6, his brother texted me asking, "Is he safe?" He's not responding to anybody's messages. And so that's when I called him to get more information. He said that my husband had been talking with a friend, texting with a friend that morning, and then she wasn't hearing from him anymore, and he stopped, and she got worried, and then nobody has been able to get a hold of him. So I had phone numbers of several of his coworkers, and my first thought was to call this coworker and um and tell him he needs to go back to the work building and check and look look for my husband. Um I'm going to backtrack there and say that he had he had several times that spring that he told me, "Oh, I brought a rope to work with me," and was evaluating the structure in the bathroom. I thought about using my belt. He had told me. So like things were really developing, things were getting more intense.
Yeah.
And then to have this moment, um that my first thought was, shit, coworker needs to go back to the work building and look for him. And then when I called him and he answered the phone, my thought process changed and I said, no, 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 I need to ask, did he even go to work today? Nope. And nobody's been able to get a hold of him. He didn't call in and um, nobody got, like, he wouldn't answer any messages or phone calls. So um, I went into I'm going to just say it was an adrenaline takeover at that point of I was at a friend's house that was having my kids and I said, I need to go. I need to go now. Um, I need to go do a suicide check. So I raced back to my house and when I got there, there were a couple of people from the church there. Um, I had I had quit going to church. I quit the church in October 2018. And at first it was just, I can't handle doing this anymore. And I can't handle this with my life dissolving the way that it is. And I'm, I was already like reduced at a point in my belief of I'm barely hanging on by a thread. Um, and, and now that's just snapped. So now I'm just going to church out of habitual motion, but fuck it, I can't carry this anymore either. So I had quit in October 2018 and then through research and learning for myself, I had um, come to the conclusion that, it's all made up. Shared that with my husband. And so then in February 2019, he exited as well. He quit the church. And so seeing people from the church in my driveway, it was like a little bristled, but at the same time,
You mean after he took his life?
yes.
Okay.
And in that moment. But I understood from seeing who it was, I understood why they were there and how they were there. That the friend he had been texting with that morning was still Mormon. And so she was able to contact some other Mormons. And the ones that were in my driveway when I arrived there, the ones that were on my doorstep, she must have contacted and asked them to go to the house to do a wellness check too, because one was training for like a CNA or whatever medical degree or certification or whatever. She was training in medicine so that if first aid or resuscitation was needed, that she could provide that. So I understood that when I saw them. I was like, okay, so I know who he was talking to. I know that she got you guys involved and why. So it wasn't like a Mormon thing, but it was that. So I just unloaded words out of my mouth and said, look, we're here to check for a body. So we just need to go into the house and find him. I punched in the door code.
Why not just call the police?
Didn't cross my mind.
Fair. That's fair.
And so I told them that we needed to check the basement and the garage first, because those would be the places in the house where
mentioned
he'd be able to hang himself, and
right.
Hanging was what he primarily had
talked about. Yeah, we tend to go through all the ways in our minds and then decide on one.
Yep. And that was the way that he had attempted when he was 20. So he wasn't in those places. And so then I raced up the stairs, and I was the first one to enter my bedroom, and nothing in the bedroom. Bed was fine. Bed was clean and put together. Went through the bathroom to the closet, and there was a body on the floor. The door to the gun safe was open, and there was a body on the floor. And I started yelling to check him, check his pulse. And the woman's husband grabbed me and pulled me out and told me it's too late. There's nothing to do. And I started kicking and screaming and yelling all the obscenities. I was so mad because I had tried everything. I had taken the ropes away, and when he was kicking me out of the house, I grabbed my keys to the gun safe and I took those with me, and I tried to find his, and or at least I thought that I grabbed one set and wasn't sure if there was another set, and I was so angry. I ran back in and I grabbed the keys from the gun safe and I threw them across the floor, and I was yelling. I was yelling at him. I knew there was a second set. I tried to stop this. I tried to prevent this.
You know you couldn't.
Oh, I know that. But I was angry and I was yelling at him. Like, he's dead, but I was yelling at him. I was angry and I was unloading. It just all came out. I know that I couldn't have prevented it, because even if I had both of the keys to the gun safe, there's always another method. There's pills, there's alcohol, there's knives, there's
always something.
There's always something. So, like, no, I was just angry because I was angry.
Yeah.
And that was just how the reaction exploded out of me. And so the other lady called 911, and it was great that she was there, because I don't know how the hell I would have called 911. I actually probably wouldn't have processed and thought to call 911. Like, just everything just went. Everything in my brain just shut off. Everything shut off. And it was just, it was just a rage fit. So they got me out of the house, and she called 911 and was able to clearly tell them what happened. And so that processed things. When I was done giving my report to the police and they were done needing me, I called my sister first thing and told her, because somewhere in my logical brain I said, well, we have to process a funeral now. And so we call the death expert. We call the funeral director's sister, and she's going to tell me what to do, because I can't think of what to do.
And this is not the youngest?
No.
Okay.
No. This would be child rank number 4.
Okay.
2 years older than me. Um, so she told me what to do. She told me um like phone calls to make. Um, his parents call his brother back, obviously, because I was in communication with his brother. And so that kind of started things. I spent the night at a neighbor's house that night. It was a neighbor I had been meaning to meet for a while. She was somebody who quit going to the church as well, but other church friends told me, "Well, hey, she's just right there and she's pretty cool and like, so if you just need a fun another mom friend and she's got kids that are compatible ages with yours." And so, I had been told about her, but we hadn't really met and talked until that night when she came over and offered me her couch. And not that I slept, but spent the night at her house and notified the friends that were taking care of my kids. And so, yeah, just kind of took care of things in whatever catatonic way I could. And then my sister came down in the morning. I think she drove down with a friend. She must have gotten a friend to drive down with her. Like, my memory is very fuzzy and clouded over the situation, but her purpose in coming down from Denver was to pick me and the kids up. She told me that she was going to pack bags for us and she was going to drive us up to my mom's house and that I would be staying at my mom's house so that I was put in a place where I could be taken care of. The kids could be taken care of. And I wouldn't have to think about things and function. So she must have driven down with a friend so that her friend could then drive her car back up, and she was driving my car because she was like, you can't drive.
Right. Yeah.
Like
Not
in
safe.
fact, I think she must have told me that night when I was at my house, and I called her and I told her, because she must have told me, well, okay, 1, you can't sleep in that house tonight. 2, where can you go to sleep then? Because don't drive anywhere, but where can you go to sleep? And I was like, I don't know. There's this neighbor that I haven't met, but I guess she's cool. So I'll sleep in her house.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Yeah. Like we really hadn't, dark humor kicks in quickly. And I remember sitting on her couch telling her, so you've been told about me for months and I've been told about you for months, but like fucking guy had to die for us to get together, I guess. Sorry, this is an awkward meeting.
And a friend of mine always makes dark jokes. And I'm like, dark people understand dark jokes.
Yes. Yeah, it's a thing. So, yeah, just and went through the process of planning a funeral. I called it a celebration of life. And I know that people usually just say celebration of life because they're uncomfortable with the term funeral, but then it ends up being a funeral anyway.
Right.
But like I went out of my way to make sure, like I really did try to make it a celebration. Like he was a very bright light to a lot of people. And when that flame gets extinguished, when that goes out in suicide, and when that's such a shock to people because nobody knew. I mean, his family knew, but that was it. His family knew and I knew, and that was it. And so when it's such a shock to people and when my kids lose their father that way, and my sister coached me through how to explain this to them so that it was not she coached me through to tell them that his brain was sick and he couldn't make good decisions and his brain told him to kill his body, something to that effect. She told me not to say anything about how he did it, where he did it, where he died at all. Don't say anything about where he died, because if you tell the kids that he died in the hospital, then they're going to be scared of hospitals. That's where my dad died. Kind of a thing. And he didn't. Like, he did it in my bedroom closet. So don't tell the kids that either, because then that's going to make home an unsafe place. Like, so many things. Don't say he moved on to another place or he's happy now, because then that'll like idealize in their brains that, oh, well, if I'm sad and I want to be happy, then, so there's that. So I really kind of threw it like a party. The celebration of life. I had red helium balloons. I played upbeat pop music that was songs that he enjoyed listening to or songs that he had sung to the kids on guitar as their like bedtime routine, because he played the guitar for them every night and sang. I told people on Facebook, I said, so like, here's the celebration of life information. We weren't formal people, so don't feel like a need to wear formal attire for a funeral or anything. Wear whatever you're comfortable with, but my kids and I will be wearing superhero shirts because he was really into superheroes. And so the number of people that showed up in superhero shirts or socks or costumes, or the guy who was like, I've been to so many funerals, I can't handle not dressing in appropriate funeral wear, but wore a Superman shirt under the button-up shirt and jacket. So, like, we did that, and like the songs during the service that I had played to like punctuate the speaking moments of the memories were like the movie Coco was fresh at that time, and so the song that the dad plays to his daughter when he's about to leave, one, he's playing it and singing it on guitar, but two, it's Remember Me, and it's talking about remember me and I'm always with you. And so that song was a father's message to a daughter in the movie, so playing that to like help my kids with it in that moment too, or like they enjoyed listening to the soundtrack from the movie Home, DreamWorks movie with the weird little purple alien.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Voiced by Sheldon.
From The Big Bang Theory?
Yeah.
Okay.
Uh-huh. Yeah, it's voiced by Sheldon. Because the name is skipping my Jim Parsons. That's his name. Anyway, so there's a song from that soundtrack called Red Balloon. And it's very like high energy, upbeat, really makes you want to move and dance. And it starts with, if you've got troubles, let them go. Let them soar so high, high into the sky, just like a red balloon. And so that's why I had the red helium balloons, and we did a balloon release at the end of the service. So yeah, really just tried to keep things upbeat and as light as something so heavy could be.
Do you regret doing it that way?
No, the only thing I regret about that is not getting up to shut up the guy who spoke during the open mic. So I decided to have an open mic time where people could get up and share their memories or their thoughts about him. And this one guy that knew his parents, but not him, got up to speak. and went on for way too long because that's what people who just need some attention drawn to themselves do. And he was a Mormon from the church. And so he was talking about all this Mormon stuff. And I had been very clear at the beginning that this was not a religious service because neither one of us were religious. And so he gets up and starts spouting all this Mormon stuff. And I'm sitting holding a 3-year-old on my lap, cuddling him in his blanket. And so, like, my only regret is that I did not get up and shut him up and say, if you don't know the guy in the casket, you can't speak.
Yeah.
Also,
that's fair.
You don't get to be sharing your beliefs that we don't share.
There's lots of those out there.
Thanks. So, yeah. So no, that's my only regret is that I didn't get up and shut him up because there were actual people that were grieving that could have
used that.
There were plenty of people that could have actually contributed functionally.
Right. Yeah.
So, yeah, that's my only regret.
Any criticism for doing it that way?
No.
Because he was a suicide?
No.
Okay, that's good. That's good. Really good. Some people just react oddly when it comes to death, which is understandable. I'm not saying that they shouldn't. It's just some people just lose their minds over it.
Yeah.
But I grew up with it. So, I buried my aunt on my birthday when I was young. Both my grandfathers that year. Since I was young, I've been dealing with death. So it's not as big a deal to me as it would be to most people or majority of people.
Mm-hmm. By that time, I had lost a brother and 3 grandparents. So I was acquainted as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this. No, keep going. You just keep.
My thought was to backtrack a little bit and say that when I initially posted on Facebook to let everybody know, there was outpouring of condolences and support. But what really stuck to me was 2 female friends of mine reached out and said, can you talk about this because my husband is suicidal too? So initially in announcing the suicide of a husband,
wow,
I had people reaching out for help and support.
Were you ready at that time?
Hell no, but I did it anyway.
That's what we do.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that concludes part 2, episode 8. Join us next week for part 3, episode 9. And it is another suicide attempt. It's a very difficult path. When you walk close to this, it seems to plague your whole life. It looks like. So yeah, please join us. She's not done, and she's got more story to tell, and that's good. So thanks for joining us today. And a few things: like and subscribe if you would. That helps me out a lot. Helps me move up the charts so I can raise money and get more attention that way, so I can start helping people get in therapy. I mean, that is the ultimate goal at this point, is to start saving lives. So please help me do that. Also, and you can find all the information on the website for that. For the like and subscribe would be on Spotify. So you can directly link from the website to Spotify under the listen button on the first page. And also on Spotify, we're going to be doing polls and Q&A. So please get involved in that. I am going to start putting out videos weekly. I think that's a pretty good idea of my rants and my rage. And you're going to get an inside view of my monkey mind. So I guess when you pull your pants down, you pull them all the way down. Thanks for joining us. Enjoy your day. The Suicide Monk is out. See you on the flip side.